Hello everybody and welcome back to the United Stand. We are here with the B&B show. Ben Jacobs is joining us, transfer expert and amazing journalist, joining us for another show about Manchester United's latest news and transfer news. And Ben, I am so excited to get into it. It's going to be a good one, I can feel it.
Yeah, there's lots of news. It's ramping up. And of course, summer is, as we've said many times, going to be very big for Manchester United.
Yeah, even Harry Maguire was talking about how big of a summer it is going to be for Manchester United. No pressure or anything like that. I want to get straight into what would be a massive signing for Manchester United if they pulled it off, especially because of all the uncertainty around where his future is going to be. And it is Elliot Anderson, Ben. We're going to talk about it once again. We've seen reports, including Fabrizio Romano, talking about Anderson being in advanced talks with Manchester City. From what you're hearing, have Manchester United made any move for him at all? And are Man City deep into talks with Elliot Anderson?
Yeah, I stand by what I've said many times, that Elliot Anderson is the top target for Manchester United. And the same can be said, I think, for Manchester City. And maybe the new bit of information now is that it looks like not only being a race between those two teams, but perhaps a surprise now if Elliot Anderson goes anywhere except either the red or the blue half of Manchester. Previously, it's been thought that Chelsea could enter the conversation. Bayern Munich have looked in the past as well. But as I said a few shows ago, Anderson has been deciding, does he want this resolved in terms of on the player side, agreeing terms, that kind of thing now? Or does he want to wait until he works out what division Nottingham Forest are in, and even after the World Cup? And suitors in the months of January and February were told, hold off. He wants to make sure he gets in the England side. It looks like a given now for the World Cup. He wants to focus on Nottingham Forest. And this is why efforts are only now ramping up as we get into the early part of April, as opposed to a mad race as soon as the January window shut. And make no mistake, Manchester United are in this race. Do they face serious competition from Man City? Yes. Are Manchester City able to offer more money? Yes, again. But is Elliot Anderson only going to decide on money? Probably not. That's my information. It will be about the project. So he'll have to learn whether Pep Guardiola is going to stay or go this summer, and also understand who the new Manchester United manager is going to be. And at this stage, what I can tell you is Man City are pushing on the player side. Manchester United have done that legwork already, to my knowledge. Nobody has started any formal talks with Nottingham Forest. And one of the reasons for that is likely to be because if everyone waits, then if Forest end up going down, you might be able to get a much better deal. So it is true that Manchester City are advancing on the player side, but it's not true that anybody is in advanced talks with Nottingham Forest or any formal talks yet with Nottingham Forest. And that's what makes it somewhat an open race. But the pool of suitors has diminished in terms of the likelihood where Elliot Anderson will go. And I'm told now it'll be a surprise if the destination isn't Manchester. And it looks like, as with Antoine Semenyo, it's going to be a race between the blue and the red half of Manchester.
With Man City advancing on the player side, do Manchester United not have any worry that will advance City to win that race? If he is their genuine top target, which has been reported multiple times, and you've said it on this show before, are Manchester United not worried about letting them continue in that race uncontested?
No, because the money is not something like for like wage-wise that Manchester United would match comparative to Manchester City. If City want to just chuck bucket loads of money at a player and the player's sold on getting the highest possible wage, then Manchester City are always likely to win those kind of races. If the player is willing to listen to a project, maybe think a bit more long-term, be patient, then Manchester United can do those types of deals on their own terms. And that was obviously the case with Brian and Mbeumo, where they got the player buy-in and then they said, great, now we can approach the club knowing that the player only wants to end up in one destination. So it's just different tactics. And who moves first or fastest isn't always the club that wins a particular race. And remember, with Manchester City, there's a lot of variables still at play. One is whether Pep Guardiola is going to stay or go. The other factor in this is Rodri as well, who's been speaking in the last few days about how it would be difficult to turn down Real Madrid. And yet Manchester City are hoping that the Ballon d'Or winner will sign a new deal. yes, Bernardo Silva is leaving and will not be offered a new contract, to my information, at Man City. So that will mean that midfield is a big priority anyway, as far as Hugo Viana and Manchester City are concerned. But I think with Elliot Anderson, City view him as being a bit more deeper lying and having the ability to be a metronome and have some offensive output and get everywhere on the field, but start in a deeper position. I think Manchester United's perspective is they could sign an out-and-out 6 and Elliot Anderson, who can play as 6 or 8. So there will be a slightly different, I think, profile view of not how he is now, but how Elliot Anderson will develop. And Manchester United feel that Anderson could follow a path like Declan Rice. And if you go back to Declan Rice in the last sort of 12 to 18 months at West Ham, and probably more so the first season at Arsenal, he was really being encouraged to get more goal contributions. And Elliot Anderson has got that in his locker as well. Whereas I think from Manchester City's perspective, they're quite happy to have Elliot Anderson doing what he's doing at Nottingham Forest now, getting deep, being very disciplined, winning the ball back. And those goal contributions aren't as important to Manchester City's central midfield because they've got players like Phil Foden and Ryan Cherky and Omar Marmoush already at the football club. And yes, that's the same for Man United in the sense there's Mbeumo and there's Cunha and there's obviously lots of goals in the squad therefore. But I still think Manchester United think Elliot Anderson has that ability to be one of those players that, in terms of putting the ball in the back of the net or getting more assists, can improve on those numbers. So let's see what the player decides. But as I said in my first answer, it's going to be a battle between the blue and the red half of Manchester with slightly different pitches. But this won't be about Man United, even with Champions League football, just throwing money at the problem. They'll be more disciplined in how they pitch to a player like Elliot Anderson. If he's not sold on a club like Manchester United, they'll move on to other targets as they did with Antoine Semenyo.
I mean, it could be interesting, that sales pitch from Manchester United, not necessarily asking him to play a more advanced role, but saying that that is an opportunity for him. That could be something that he would like to do with, his career and moving forward and with his development. And, a lot of players like to move into that role. It's no secret. So I don't know what he would like to do. Maybe he'd love to just sit in front of the defence and continue doing what he's doing now. But I agree with Manchester United's side here. I actually think there is a lot more potential in Elliot Anderson with moving forward with the ball as well in the attacking third. So that's interesting. You probably don't know absolutely, but just your feeling. Do you think he'll make his decision before or after the World Cup?
Yeah, I think Elliot Anderson is in no rush. That's what I've always been told, because he's well aware that whether Forest stay up or don't, there's an extremely strong possibility that he'll go. Evangelos Marinakis is not to be discounted in all of this, as was proven with the whole Morgan Gibbs-White saga. So it's not to say that Forest will just roll over. But obviously from Elliot Anderson's point of view, he wants to play Champions League football. He wants to win trophies, and he's not getting that at the moment at Nottingham Forest. So the intel I have is that there is a high likelihood that even if Forest stay in the Premier League, Elliot Anderson leaves that club. But right now, when he decides, will also depend upon when the teams interested, particularly the two Manchester clubs, actually go to Nottingham Forest. And because there remains a possibility that both clubs will wait. And that wait is down to one, maybe being able to get a better deal if Forest go down, but two, perversely, to get the better deal if Forest stay up. You've still got to wait, because if you bug them now and say, we want to have a meeting, we want to make an offer, we want a pre-agreement, and Forest turn around and go, we're in a relegation battle, the timing's all wrong, you can damage your relationship, and that won't be forgotten. And Evangelos Marinakis will then, when you actually get to the point of any formal negotiations, not forget the fact that you didn't do it on the timeline that Forest were looking for as well. So it wouldn't at all surprise me if formal talks with Forest don't start until towards or the end of the season. And as a consequence, Elliot Anderson will be off on international duty and may not decide his future until after the World Cup. So this is kind of what the Manchester clubs have been doing, going first and foremost to the Anderson camp to find out, does he want to remove all distraction and name his preferred club before the World Cup? Or actually, is he going to respect Forest's timeline, wait for that formal negotiation during the summer? And then as a consequence, Elliot Anderson might not make his final decision until after the World Cup. And at the moment, the reason why I don't have an answer is because Man City and Man United don't have an answer.
Interesting stuff. Well, let's watch that timeline. I'm holding on to the fact that Ben keeps saying that we're still in the race. So, and that's not saying necessarily that United will win the race. City are absolutely in there as well. But I feel like a lot of the rumours are that it's just all Manchester City now. But the fact that Manchester United is still in it gives me a little bit
City
of hope.
Are going strong. City are going strong, but that's not new news. City have always been strong on Elliot Anderson. Man United have always been strong on Elliot Anderson. But the key point people are forgetting is when you hear City advanced, that's only accurate in terms of player side talks. It's inaccurate regarding Nottingham Forest talks. Nobody's made an approach to Forest formally. Nobody's made a bid to Forest formally. And if you think about how Evangelos Marinakis works, you've got to be able to agree a fee, and that fee will likely be influenced on the division that Nottingham Forest are in and the appetite of Marinakis to sell if Forest are still a Premier League club. And all of that will influence what someone's prepared to pay. And until we know the price, which I think will be a big factor in who moves fast and aggressively, we won't have the full picture. And as a consequence, we can't say that Man City are front runners in terms of reaching an agreement with Nottingham Forest, but we can say that over the last few weeks, they've been pushing very hard to try and get player buy-in.
I do want to move on from this subject, but just from your point of view, if Man United know that City are pushing really hard to get player buy-in, yet it's being put out there that it's Man United's he is Manchester United's top target. Why are Manchester United not going all guns blazing on the player side?
Well, they've already done it. I mean, they've held their own meetings. They've made it clear that they're interested. You can't do much more at this stage. It might be more beneficial for Manchester United, having built a relationship also on the player side, to say, we'll be back in touch towards the end of the season when we can tell you about our new manager, when we can tell you whether we are or aren't likely to get Champions League football. It sort of feels from the outside like a game of Football Manager, and I can understand why Man United fans think, well, City are pushing, City are taking the meeting, City are going to get the green light, and we're just sitting there. But it doesn't work like that. Your recruitment team is not reactive to a meeting that another club takes. Your recruitment team is proactive, and at the point they think the timing is right, having already held some meetings with the player side, if they think they can win this race, they'll come back in. But pushing at this stage, even for Man City, doesn't really mean competing with Man United or trying to force the player to pick between the two clubs. Pushing is getting to the point where you're saying, have we got a package financially in place that's acceptable to the player? And from there, the player himself is likely to turn around to both clubs and say, okay, now let me focus on finishing the season, focus on trying to keep Nottingham Forest up, maybe focus on the World Cup. But as importantly, he's going to have two big questions to each team. And they're going to be the same question. Who's your manager next season? And if City can't answer that yet with Pep, and if Man United can't answer that yet between Carrick and other candidates, then you can't get from pushing for a player to getting that full buy-in because he doesn't have the complete picture over who he's going to be playing under at either club yet, not definitively.
Okay, interesting stuff. Let's see how it develops. Thank you very much for your insight on Elliot Anderson, a player that is having an extremely good season, and I think he's going to have an extremely good World Cup as well. Real top quality player there. Speaking of top quality players, I want to get clarification on Bruno Guimarães of Newcastle, because mixed reports. There has been reports about conversations with the players' camp at Manchester United. There's been reports about Manchester United having him further down the list because of his age profile of not being, in that area of 26 and under. I mean, with Newcastle as a whole, Ben, what are the updates on Bruno Guimarães, Sandro Tonali? And I mean, there's even been talk of Lewis Hall as of late as a left-back option. I mean, I don't realistically think that Newcastle is just going to let their whole team be decimated. But what's the priorities for Manchester United? And is there any real substance on any of them players?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we've said on this show in the past has been reported in the last few days. So to reiterate, Lewis Miley going nowhere to my knowledge, and Newcastle are trying to get him to sign a new deal, but he's not a player that they're prepared to sell. So suitors know that and respect that.
Is that Lewis Hall? Sorry.
Shock. Yes, sorry, Lewis Hall. I might have said Lewis Miley. Apologies. Lewis Hall. Yeah. Lewis Miley, great player, by the way, as well. Yeah, Lewis Hall going nowhere, and Newcastle are trying to extend his contract. And I'm not aware, therefore, of any likelihood of a departure this summer. With Sandro Tonali, Bruno Guimarães, Newcastle are obviously not going to entertain offers for both. And I think that their position will be they would like to keep each at the club, but it's obvious from sources on the player side with each of Tonali and Guimarães that they're exploring their options. Newcastle fans don't like to hear it. Always get a lot of feedback from Newcastle fans who I've got huge respect for.
So have I then. I get a lot of it as well.
But, you know, it's just the reality, and hindsight will always be a factor in this, you know. So it was the same with Alexander Isak when I revealed in April that Liverpool were going to try and that there was concrete possibility he might leave. A lot of people didn't like to hear that. And throughout the summer, it was proven to be the case that the position of not for sale eventually was a sale, and the position of 150 million was eventually 125 million. So sometimes you want to believe all your players will stay, but that doesn't mean the players aren't looking. But what's true from Newcastle's perspective, particularly with Tonali and Guimarães, is were one to go, there's almost no chance the other sale will be sanctioned. And that's also down to the fact that they'll get good money for both of them. So if finances are a factor, if Newcastle don't get Champions League football, then they won't need to sell Tonali and Guimarães, and they will have options potentially to sell one, or to explore a Gordon sale, or to look at a striker. And Nick Voltemade, even though he's not been there for long, could go. There's interest from Manchester City and others in Tino Livramento. So there will be options that mean allowing an exit of both Tonali and Guimarães is highly unlikely. But as I said on the previous show, the player camps are looking at options without necessarily forcing or agitating anything at this stage. And at the same time, I think both the Tonali and Guimarães camp are aware that if one goes, the other won't. So it's almost an internal race to see, is anything concrete here? With Bruno Guimarães and Tonali, they've both been discussed by Manchester United. As we said on this show and is widely reported now, and I think we said it about 6 months ago, two midfielders are always the target for Man United. So you would expect a list of 10, 12, 15 names, and Guimarães and Tonali are on it. With Bruno Guimarães, there was a meeting with the player camp, but it was never true that anything was advanced or agreed, and that's still the case at the time we're live now. But there was a meeting between Bruno Guimarães and Manchester United, which tells you that they're trying to understand that situation without necessarily advancing or moving right now. With Sandro Tonali, I think he's higher than Bruno Guimarães on the list. That's what I hear. Okay. But he's also very tough to get away because he'll be higher priced than Bruno Guimarães. And I stand by the information that I've said in the past that Sandro Tonali would love, if finances allow, to go back to Italy. But there's almost no Italian club that can afford the fee and the wage and all other associated costs, which means that feasibly, even if sentimentally the player may think differently, if Tonali leaves Newcastle, Premier League is about the only place that he could go, other than maybe Real Madrid, who are also in the market for a central midfielder. And as a consequence, Manchester United may feel that that deal is possible at the right number, but they also may need to break the British transfer record or somewhere close to get Sandro Tonali. So Champions League could be important if they're to advance on that front. And I have no real information at this stage as to whether Tonali has a preference, say, between Arsenal, who have been linked, or Manchester United. Because as I said before, his preference is to go back to Italy, but he's well aware that the finances are likely to make a move to Italy near impossible this summer. So there is some encouragement for Premier League clubs regarding Sandro Tonali. But at this stage, there's been no approach to Newcastle United. And once again, I repeat what we said right at the top of the show. The top midfield target for Manchester United, whether they get him or not, is Elliot Anderson. And then Adam Wharton needs to be mentioned in the conversation, and so does Carlos Baleba.
Well, Ben, you took the words right out of my mouth, because my next question was going to be about Adam Wharton. I've seen his name pop up quite a lot over the past week for Manchester United, and it does make sense to me in terms of how gettable he would be for Manchester United, the price point, and also, you know, the sort of profile that Manchester United might be looking at. So Adam Wharton, is he creeping his way up into being a top target for Manchester United? Because he was a little bit unspoken of, but you know, he's playing for Crystal Palace as of now. Would Crystal Palace be open to selling, and is he high up on Manchester United's list?
Yeah, I mean, Palace were trying to get Wharton to sign a new deal, but at this stage, there's been no progress. Obviously, if that happens between now and the end of the season, it will likely shut the door for the summer. And the Wharton camp were keen to do something similar if they sign a new deal to Antoine Semenyo and have a kind of release clause that would become active either in January 2027 or the following summer. So that was the perspective of Palace, to get Wharton to stay at least one extra year and then take him off the market for this summer. But there's been no progress. And the fallout from Oliver Glasner kind of slightly acrimoniously announcing that he was leaving, coupled with the fact that Mark Gahey was sold, and then obviously Jean-Philippe Mateta was trying very hard to get out of the football club. And that doesn't go unnoticed in the dressing room. So there's a lot of instability at the moment, and the quicker Crystal Palace can bring in a new manager and settle things down, the better from their perspective. But there remains a realistic possibility that Adam Wharton, as it stands anyway, in the absence of that new deal, is sold this summer. And his price point will be, to my knowledge, lower than some of the other names that we've mentioned. Certainly not in excess of 100 million, not necessarily the 50 or 60 million that some reports have suggested. I was always told that between 70 and 80 million for a Champions League club, there was kind of a gentleman's agreement in place allowing Adam Wharton to leave. So that might prove quite important for Manchester United. But gentlemen's agreements are not legally enforceable. Things can change. If a new manager comes in and says, I'm taking this job, but you're not selling Adam Wharton, that can influence how a hierarchy of a football club like Crystal Palace think. So there's a few variables, but yes, he's in Manchester United's thinking. And a signing like Adam Wharton would help them then add a second midfielder like an Elliot Anderson that has chemistry between them, and I would argue Kobbie Mainoo as well, because these are the kind of players that have got a lot of strings to their bow. They can play in more than one position. And as importantly, they can play in a singular position but offer you a different skill set, which is a very underrated point, because usually when we're talking about a 6, we're saying they can be an 8. And when we're saying they're an 8, we're talking about box to box. They can drop into a 6 or they can get into a 10 position. But actually, I think what Manchester United like is the idea of potentially having a 6 that in a 6 position can offer you that progressive passing or that ability to get assists from a deeper position without necessarily shifting up the field, or an 8 alternatively that can not just get box to box but can be intricate in their passing and can just make those little mini movements within game management that take them slightly wider, or play balls in triangles or through balls without actually moving out of position. Because then what it means is you can still get the best out of your Cunhas, your Mbumos, your Bruno Fernandeses without having too many people fighting for the same space. And you get that offensive and defensive output, but still that disciplined nature, which means with players like Wharton and Anderson, if you get caught on the counter-attack, they've not actually moved from a 6 or an 8 position. So it's that intelligence, it's those mini movements, and it's actually that disciplined nature while still having offensive output. Whereas usually when we talk about players like, say, Declan Rice or Enzo Fernandez, it's about how they've evolved from a 6 to get into an 8 position and then to get into a 10 position. But that requires you pushing further up the field.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if the kind of midfielders Manchester United sign that on paper are deeper are actually asked to stay territorially in a more defined role, but still find a way to get involved in the offensive output. And I think players like Wharton and Elliot Anderson both fall into that category, which is why they're quite high in Manchester United's thinking.
My only worry about the likes of Adam Wharton, I think he's a top quality footballer, do not get me wrong. I think 70, 80 million is high. My only worry is I don't think his profile necessarily complements Kobbie Mainoo, who looks like he's about to sign a new long-term deal, in terms of he has very similar attributes to Kobbie Mainoo. The different players, I get that, and you know, it would be interesting to see how he would partner the likes of an Elliot Anderson. I think that could work, but if Kobbie Mainoo is signing that long-term deal, then you would suspect that he is going to be built around in the midfield. It's gonna be interesting. I mean, is there any other names that you've heard of, Ben, whether that we've spoken about them before on the show or even outside the Premier League, that you've seen Manchester United looking at for the midfield?
Yeah, I mean, Angelo is still there, but lower down the pecking order than in January. So he's one to watch. That release clause still exists. Andre Santos, so revealed on this show, still a player Manchester United really like as well. Doesn't look like there's going to be any push from Chelsea's point of view to sell. And Liam Rosinia still seems safe for now, despite the fact that Chelsea have lost 4 games in a row. And he was the manager that had Andre Santos at Strasbourg. So in the context of that, it feels like that's a player manager likes and Chelsea still like. So those names that I've mentioned are currently the more leading ones. And I know we've heard some reports and very respected journalists that have kind of said this big list of 2 midfielders and therefore 10 to 12 names also has some that haven't been reported in the media and come from foreign clubs. My information is that the search for the 2 central midfielders is strategically very similar to the search for 2 10s. So there is actually a heavy prioritisation on proven Premier League experience. Of course, there'll be names from outside of the Premier League that could take quite quickly to the Premier League. But I would say 70% of the names on the dozen or so that are there have some kind of Premier League connection, either now or in the past, because Manchester United are very much about finding players in their midfield revamp that can hit the ground running. And therefore, if they get Champions League this season, they can build straight on that. This isn't, even though people have compared Jim Ratcliffe's strategy to Chelsea's, a Chelsea-like project. Man United do want to explore regions like South America, and they do want homegrown talent, and they do want to lower the average age. So maybe that is a factor that counts against Bruno Guimarães, for example. But generally speaking, they're looking for names for the now, and they're doing that because they're aware that to get this project on track, they can't afford another 2, 3, 4 years of acclimatizing and developing young foreign players if they're ones that have big price tags. This midfield revamp, regardless of Kobbie Mainoo and the new contract, is about finding players for the now. And at least one of those midfielders, if not both, will be coming into the club and will feel that they're starters at the football club. So within this bigger picture of the kind of central midfielders they're looking for, it's also about finding players for the now. And that's why I think a heavy proportion of the shortlist do have Premier League experience or are currently at Premier League clubs.
Is there anything quickly in Mateus Fernandes of West Ham? I really like the player, which is why I'm asking about it, because when I'm on the show, I have an opportunity, I'll ask about a player that I like. And I've seen his name touted around a little bit. Is there anything in him at all?
Yeah, I think possibility he leaves West Ham, obviously, because if they go down, then definitely tough to keep. And there is some appreciation, I'm told, by Jason Wilcox, and he falls into the same category as João Gomez, to my knowledge, where Man United have run some data. They've had a few cursory conversations, but it's just really important to stress at this stage, in particular, a few months out from the summer, if Jason Wilcox and Christopher Vivell were not speaking to 100-player camps, they wouldn't be doing their job. So part of it is just about understanding direction of travel, merry-go-round movement, market opportunities if a team goes down. So there have been some internal conversations about players like João Gomez, Mateus Fernandes, but at this stage I'm not aware that Manchester United have done much more than that.
Okay, interesting. I really like him. I think he's a very good player, young as well. I mean, I want to ask you about another young player here, Ben, Ousmane Diomandé. I mean, how advanced is that deal from Manchester United's side? Because it does seem to be Man United's top target for that left wing position. Am I accurate in saying that as well?
I think so. Something that we said on the last show, that Ousmane Diomandé is up there as top target for Manchester United on the left side. And that is a clear indication in many ways that they're making finding a winger as important as finding 1 or 2 central midfielders. And Diomande is in red hot form. He can play on the right, he can play on the left. ticks a lot of boxes, and it wouldn't surprise me if, like Antoine Semenyo, Manchester United even think that he can go deeper and be a left fullback when needed or in the context of a tactical decision. So that's very important, because it may have a knock-on effect. If a specialist starting left winger arrives that in theory could also be converted and utilised as a wing-back, then like we've said on many other shows, they might go for a right-sided fullback potentially as more of a preference. And then with Ousmane Diomandé, I think we are going to see definitely Man United go big here, and they have a good relationship with Leipzig. Very possibly Liverpool enter this race as well.
Ben, don't do me like
Tottenham
that.
from the Premier League. You have Tottenham as well, but naturally a bit of a harder sell because there'll be no Champions League football and they might be in the Championship next season. But you'll also have Bayern Munich and PSG. So this is where Leipzig are waiting and not engaging, because they feel like with Benjamin Sesko, when Liverpool and Newcastle were in a bidding war, their feeling is that the longer they leave this over the summer, the more likely they're to get their number. From Suter's perspective, they're not buying into this 100 million number. And I think smart clubs like Liverpool and Man United, as Man United did with Semenyo, will start not with Leipzig here, but the player side. And they will try and get a commitment from the player first. And Man United have already held some talks on the player side, and so have Liverpool and so have PSG. And if they get that player to say, I want Man United or I want Liverpool, then they'll go to Leipzig, as Manchester United, by the way, did with Benjamin Sesko, in the hope that other clubs back off. And then if you're only negotiating with Leipzig, it's still very difficult, but suddenly clubs will be confident that this final number will not be 100 million euros. Everyone was put off after AFCON by moving in January, because Leipzig were insistent that not for sale in January or 100 million euros or more in January. But clubs interested in Diomande feel like 60, 65, maybe 75 million euros, not pounds, might be a starting point for a conversation here. So significantly less than 100 million euros. But we'll have to wait and see, because Leipzig normally get their price. If it's a bidding war, they'll have even more chance of getting their price. But I would say above Anthony Gordon and a few of the other names that have been reported on that left side, Diomande is a leading target for Manchester United. But don't discount Liverpool and PSG in particular. And then I think it will be difficult for Tottenham, and Bayern could enter this race as well.
The way I look at it, if you're Diomande, is, I'm sorry, but Spurs, I'd be absolutely flabbergasted if you ended up going there. No disrespect to Spurs, but why would you want to go there in their current situation when you've got clubs that are going to be in the Champions League looking at you? PSG, obviously, crazy good team, but you've got a lot of competition from exceptionally good players on them wing positions. And then Bayern also got really good competition, but he knows the league, that could be an option. Liverpool is where I get worried, because I think he stated before that he's a Liverpool fan, or his family are anyway. And with Mo Salah leaving, he can play both sides, and talks of Gakpo potentially going as well. That could be a really big one. We've just got to hope that Liverpool don't get Champions League, because that then makes it a bit harder of a sell. I mean, it can still happen. We saw that with Manchester United in the summer, but it is a harder sell. So, yeah, do you think Man United will go on this early, maybe to try and get ahead of the competition?
I don't think you can get ahead of the competition, because I think Leipzig don't work like that. So they may not agree a package early, knowing that a high volume of suitors will come calling. So the thing you can do early is try and get the player to say, I only want one club. But I don't think Diomande will necessarily do that, because he can't commit to Man United until he knows who the manager is and what they've got next season. Same could arguably be said for Liverpool, as you say, not guaranteed Champions League football, although the expectation is that Arne Slot stays. With PSG, he would probably have to understand, is there going to be a wide outgoing? And PSG sources are adamant, by the way, that Barcola, Doué, Kvaratskhelia, despite links with the Premier League, they're going nowhere. So there's not enough space in that team to accommodate him. And obviously from Bayern's point of view, maybe they have a bit behind the scenes, but they would still have to explain to him exactly where he's going to play and on what side. And I know we've heard some suggestions that Michael Olise, another versatile wide player, might go, but that's not my understanding. There are teams like Liverpool and Arsenal that like Olise, but the perspective of Bayern is that they don't want him to depart either. So actually, you've either got teams that are well stocked in Diomande's position, whether left or right, or you've got teams that we don't know yet whether they will or won't have Champions League football, or we're not aware who their manager is for next season. So for me, that will influence the recruitment here. And I don't think the player is in a massive rush to make up his final decision either. So for me, this might be a deal due to the volume of interest that drags on a little bit.
I hope the connection with Christopher Vivell and the relationships built last season with Benjamin Sesko will go to Manchester United's advantage in this, but of course you've got to get the player buy-in, and that's really, really important. So have to wait and see if we can get that ball rolling. Very, very exciting young talent. Ben, before I ask you about the manager situation, which we will get onto, I want to ask you about the fullback rumours that are going on at the moment. You spoke about potentially maybe going for a right back over a left back this summer. I mean, I've seen Manchester United be linked to Nathaniel Brown. I've seen us be linked to Balde of Barcelona, and consistently linked to Miles Lewis-Skelly of Arsenal. I mean, can you talk about them links and if there's anything in any of them?
Yeah, there's certainly something in the Miles Lewis-Skelly one, and part of that is driven by the player and looking for more minutes. So that one could be one to watch. And it's definitely true that Manchester United have held a few talks there. Nathaniel Brown is at Frankfurt and doing very well. Man United in scouting, looking at that player for in excess of 6 months. So let's see whether they develop. And the other is obviously Lewis Hall. But once again, my expectation is that he stays at Newcastle. And I think there'll be a lot of noise around Lewis Hall. But actually the end result, the direction of travel is more likely to be a new contract at this stage at Newcastle United. With Balde, that's a Christopher Vivell shortlist player, if you like, and Spanish sources are adamant from Barcelona's point of view that they could have their arm twisted, but people I speak to that are closer to the player believe that he's going to do what Frenkie de Jong did and just insist that he wants to stay at Barcelona. So it would need a significant U-turn from the player to make a Premier League move. Because, as I said a moment ago, it doesn't really matter if Barcelona are trying to force someone out. A lot of these Barca players, despite their financial situation, don't just want to go because it does the club a financial favour. They want to stay and they want to be Barcelona players. And as long as that's Balde's position, it might be quite difficult to get that deal done.
I mean, it's an interesting one. I think Balde's fantastic talent. A little bit of concern over his injuries, but it looks like he will fight to stay at Barcelona, which I thought would be the case. The Miles Lewis-Skelly one's interesting. I thought you would shut that one down, Ben. I didn't think we'd hold conversations with him. I don't know why. I didn't think he'd be on the agenda. I did think it was coming from his camp just because, you know, he's a very, very exciting talent that will want to play more minutes. That's completely understandable, but that's very, very interesting. So,
well, I think one of the reasons they want to investigate that as well is because he can not only play left back, but defensive or central midfield. So you have a very different kind of profile. And that means also that in a back four, if you want one of your fullbacks to invert, which is obviously very popular in the modern game, he's comfortable and capable of doing that as well. So it's about building a different kind of profile. And that's what I think is the most fascinating decision in all of this, because we only know what Carrick's doing, right? Whereas if a new manager comes in and, broadly speaking, inherits Carrick's back four instead of Amorim's back three, how are they going to use the fullbacks? And if they're going to use a left-sided fullback, inverting with a slow build-up play, like, for example, Enzo Maresca did at Chelsea, someone like Miles Lewis-Skelly, very useful. If they're going to go more with wing-backs, then having a left winger like Diomande that can double up at left wing-back, that's very beneficial as well. So it's a bit of a challenge with the fullbacks at the moment because, as I've said on previous shows, Amorim was adamant that the most needed thing at the football club is a left wing-back. And he was playing a back three, and it needed to be somebody with pace and energy that could get wide and put a ball into a box. But under Michael Carrick, maybe there's less of a priority for that. There's question mark over Luke Shaw as well and what his long-term future is. So these are the internal considerations. And I think a new manager on the fullback, whether left-sided or right-sided, will have a big impact on what direction they go, which is why they'll obviously want to resolve who that new manager is going to be if they possibly can, sooner rather than later.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, as well, because, you know, there's a lot of talk about a right-back, but I've not really seen a significant right-back link with Manchester United yet. Do you think that's another one that will wait before they start profiling that?
Yeah, they haven't profiled it to any great degree because all of the profiling was on the left-hand side to begin with. And again, they had a lot of unresolved things to debate and determine. For example, had Harry Maguire gone instead of agreed this new deal, they might have prioritised a centre-back that could double up as left-back and then look for a right wing-back. Now Harry Maguire is staying. Are they going to not add a centre-back and prioritise a full-back? Are they going to be two-sided, which is obviously the case with someone like Tino Livramento? He can be comfortable on the left-hand side, even though he's predominantly a right-sided full-back. So every single show, I think people want an update, but that's not how Manchester United's recruitment team works. Week on week at this stage, they will not suddenly drop a bunch of new targets or advancement. They'll be moving a lot slower. And part of that is because at this stage, they don't even know who the new manager is going to be yet.
Well, I wanted to ask you about this as well in terms of a centre-back, because there's a lot of talk that a centre-back might not be the priority this summer because we've got so many things to do and it might have to wait until next summer. But with Ligt's injury, which is just very confusing and we're hoping can get better as soon as possible, with Martinez being consistently in and out of the team, Harry Maguire looks like he's going to stay. I don't know if you've got any clarity on that, but of course, he's 33. He's, he might have injury problems himself. Is there any update on Ligt and his situation? And do you think that could force Manchester United for going for a centre-back?
I think centre-back has been on the radar anyway, and the difference in how they're trying to work is not to leave these gaping holes in the squad and then have to recruit. So they're trying to be more like Liverpool, who signed Mamadashvili, Alisson was still there, signed Kirkes Robinson was still there. We're trying to keep Luis Diaz, was looking for a left winger. We're trying to keep Mo Salah until 2027, even though it's not panned out that way, whilst finding a right winger. And as a consequence, you're able to bring in players a little bit slower. Man United are very happy with the defenders they've got at the football club, feeling as that Lenny Yoro, Aidan Heaven have all got big futures ahead of them. So they do feel like they've got quality players already there. And that's maybe why they didn't want to rush moving for yet another young centre-back in the market. But I actually think Maguire staying helps them do what they've always wanted to do and look for that one more young centre-back that isn't about being an immediate starter and will not really be influenced by the Ligt situation. So the pitch to Maguire to stay is that he's still going to be integral for the football club for at least one more year. That deal, by the way, is pretty much done. I know that a few days ago it was said to be close. I'm told we can talk of it as an agreement in principle. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's announced sooner rather than later, because it's not just close, it's agreed in principle. Maguire is going to stay at Manchester United Football Club, and it's just a case of formally signing it, and the announcement will not now be far away. And that's been the direction of travel for quite some time. I told you on the show last year that Maguire already knew he wanted to stay. It was Man United delaying things, Man United deciding what they wanted to do. But by him staying, it actually makes them more intent under this new strategy to find the player before they really need the player, to go out in the market and find a young centre-back. So I think that will be the priority now for Manchester United, but without the same urgency as if Maguire had actually ended up leaving the football club. And one name I think they really like, that's a new name that I can bring to the mix, is Charlie Cresswell, who used to be at Leeds United, England under-21 international. Wolfsburg came very close to signing him in the January window, but were not able to meet the Toulouse valuation. So he's still there. He's playing every week in Ligue 1. And along with a few other names, he's one of the profiles that Man United are looking at.
Charlie Cresswell, I'll keep that one in my back pocket and see how we get on. I mean, interesting that would be going for another young centre-back when we already have Yoro and Aidan Heaven and the two senior centre-backs that would usually, you'd say, be the starters. To be fair, Harry Maguire has done insanely well this season. He's done very well for a long time. Harry Maguire.
These are not young, though, remember. These are not young. I mean, Cresswell, by the time he makes any kind of move, is going to be 24 years of age. He'll have played for Leeds a few games in the Premier League. He'll have played a full season in the Championship for Millwall, and he'll have played 2 full seasons in Ligue 1, and he'll be in his mid-20s. So, yeah, young, but not young in the sense of teenagers or inexperienced.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because Ligt, I don't know what is going to happen with his injury, but he's an important, experienced player. Martinez as well can't seem to stay fit for a long period of time. And Maguire has had his own injury concerns, despite the fact I'd love him to be fit every single game. He's doing fantastically well. So it's an interesting approach for Manchester United. I wouldn't necessarily say I think it would be the right direction, but let's hope it works out in the right way. I'll definitely follow along on that one. And then speaking of the manager, Ben, I want to get into the manager. I think a lot of people have been waiting on this. Reports yesterday suggested a 3-man shortlist, including Michael Carrick, Luis Enrique and Julian Nagelsmann. Are you hearing similar? I know you've spoken about them 3 names before on the show.
Yeah, I mean, look, Luis Enrique, once again, everyone under the sun is interested in him if there's a genuine possibility of getting him out of PSG. But we got to be fair to PSG. And the PSG position on Luis Enrique is if he wants an opportunity this summer, they'll point to the fact his contract expires in 2027 and they won't want to engage. So something will have to change from the PSG perspective. And would Enrique want to leave before his contract expires, even if he doesn't sign a new deal? Or would he want one of the best squads in world football and continue winning things, including potentially the Champions League back to back? So he's the hardest for anybody to get. But Man United wouldn't be doing this process unless they looked at the world's best coaches, and Luis Enrique is one of them. So yeah, he's on the list, but he's the least gettable of the names on the list. Julian Nagelsmann, I've mentioned several times on this show before, and he's starting to get a bit more traction. And the reason for that is even though he's contracted until the Euros, not just the end of this World Cup, the information that I have remains the same, that there is a strong possibility that Julian Nagelsmann leaves international football for club football after the World Cup. Not definite because his contract runs on beyond it, but that's his thinking at the moment, that despite a contract running beyond the World Cup, that might be the time when he's open to a big club role. So he's on the Manchester United shortlist. Roberto De Zerbi was there, like I said on the last show, and it got a fair amount of reporting in the last few days, which is accurate to my understanding. De Zerbi and Spurs is one to watch. I'm still told De Zerbi's not going to take this Spurs job between now and the end of the season, but I am told if Tottenham stay up, that De Zerbi is actually quite sold on Tottenham, and Spurs are pushing for De Zerbi, and Manchester United may know that. And you know something, we hear a lot about Mauricio Pochettino and Tottenham, and he is the other candidate, but don't discount De Zerbi and Spurs, because I think that one may have legs in the coming weeks if, again, Tottenham stay in the Premier League. And then Michael Carrick obviously has done enough to at least be part of the conversation, but let's see whether he's done enough to get the job permanently. I have to say, we've seen some reports in the last few weeks suggesting that Man United haven't spoken to other candidates, that's a big boost for Michael Carrick, that Man United are waiting to see how Michael Carrick does. That's not how a thorough process works. The only reason why they haven't formally interviewed candidates is because the roadmap for doing that was always late March into about mid-April. The first part of the phase was about data and about internally whittling down a shortlist and about informally approaching player camps and also manager camps, player camps, so they could work out what are these managers really like, who like them, who's worked with them before. Manager camps, so they could find out directly what the terms are and if there's an appetite. And then only then do you actually make your formal approach and work out who you want to interview. So if Man United had done that already, they wouldn't be doing a thorough process. It's not necessarily, to my information, a big boost for Michael Carrick, but he is in this process and does stand a chance as well.
When do you think we'll expect to see any formal movement on the manager situation, progressing to the next stage potentially?
I think the formal movement will come in April, and I think it will depend on who they pick ultimately, because Julian Nagelsmann, I'm told, would prefer to have conversations now, not too close to the World Cup. Luis Enrique would rather do it during the summer. Michael Carrick's obviously open to it now, and that would be the easiest person to interview and the most stable option. So they can pick an interview with Carrick if they feel he needs another formal interview at any point they like. But there's no one rule here, because if they want to wait for Luis Enrique, it might take a bit longer. If they want to be very aggressive on Nagelsmann, they've got to get moving now, because he doesn't want this formal type of interviews to be taking place weeks or days or during the World Cup.
Interesting stuff. I want to ask you a little bit about Kobbie Mainoo and his new deal. Do you have any information on that and the expectations for him moving forward?
Yeah, I think that with Kobbie Mainoo, the deal is almost agreed in principle. It's a longer term deal than Maguire, obviously 2031, and there'll be an option there as well. And this was always going to happen, by the way, because the challenge with Mainoo was they had to agree length, and length was never going to be signed off by the player if he wasn't playing regularly. Tie yourself down to a new long-term deal, lose all your cards of an exit, playing under a manager in Amorim, if we go back to last year, where he wasn't happy. So length was one factor, but regardless of length, they always had to bump up Mainoo's terms to match his squad standing. And one of the reasons why it happened so quickly is because the starting point was over that money to take Kobbie Mainoo to a wage of in excess of £100,000 a week and match financially the squad standing that he's had since starting and playing really well under Michael Carrick. So even if Mainoo had turned around and said, I don't want to sign a new deal, or even if Man United had turned around and said, we're not so sure about long term, it was always very likely that very quickly Manchester United would bump up Mainoo's finances, because his wage, given his age and the path through which he'd come through, was very low comparative to his squad standing. Luckily, in speaking about that, and steps were taken almost immediately after Ruben Amorim departed to tell Kobbie Mainoo, after that Manchester derby, you're going to get a bump up in wages, even if nothing else happens, because we understand that you're going to be important between now and the end of the season, and we want to reward you and get the best out of you. But luckily, in having that conversation about strictly finances and being amended and bumped up on his existing deal, it was made very clear by all parties that they thought they could get very quickly to the actual new deal and the length that would keep him at this football club through until 2031. So it's been quite routine from all parties to get close to finalising this new deal. And although it's not agreed in principle quite in the same way that Harry Maguire's is, it's extremely close to also being in a position where all parties can sign. And the expectation is that we'll get an announcement on both Maguire and Mainoo sooner rather than later.
Well, I'm glad that we have come to an agreement with Kobbie Mainoo, and he's deservedly so getting that increase, because he has been at that stature for a long time now. I mean, it will be interesting to see if it will ever be revealed what the structure, where he fits in the wage structure. I mean, I'm not too bothered about it personally. I'm not paying the wages, but it would be interesting to see how he fits in there. Do you expect him to be in the range of where the likes of Lenny Yoro is, that sort of figure within the squad?
Yeah, I mean, I'm told it's in excess of 100,000, and it puts him, as you would expect, within the top 10 or top 15 earners at the football club, which matches his squad standing as a starter. We're not talking about 200,000. We're not talking about under 100,000. It's somewhere between 100 and 120,000 pounds a week, according to my information. And I think for a player of his age and his potential, and the fact that it will be incentive driven, so within the long-term contract that he's signed, an opportunity to go even higher incrementally, and you'll have bonuses on top. And that's the other thing in all of this, that someone signing now at 100 to 120k will go up automatically by 20% if Manchester United get Champions League football. I think it's 20 or 25%, because that was put in place by the Glazers a long while ago, that in the seasons without Champions League football, the squad take a cut to protect the wage bill. So that's going to be very helpful as well for a lot of these young players and the squad generally. They're all going to be significantly rewarded or topped back up to the base wages that they originally agreed, if they were agreed in a season when Man United had Champions League football. So that's good news all round. But as I say, it's nothing excessive. It's nothing that puts him in a top 3, top 5 earner. But he's now earning a wage that all other Manchester United starters are earning, with the ability over time to go even higher, because Manchester United think that Kobbie Mainoo still has a lot of potential to realise.
Yeah, exciting stuff. So let's hope that deal is signed very soon. It's official, but it looks like it's on the way. Thank you very much, Ben. And then I want to ask you, do you have any news whatsoever on De Ligt's injury?
nothing major. Injury is not something that I make a massive play on, because you have to be respectful as far as player camps and sensitive information and things like this. What we know is that Michael Carrick has said that he's not going to deny there's a chance that he doesn't play again this season. It's a back problem, and the challenge with a back problem is that you can recover and then have setbacks quite easily, because as soon as you start getting in the gym again, or as soon as you start playing again, the load can make that something quite chronic. So all I really know on Ligt is club sources had said originally that they thought it might be minor, and yet actually it's a little bit worse than that. And given that the Netherlands have got a World Cup, I don't think Man United or the player or the Netherlands will want to rush him back at this stage. So I don't have an amount of time that I can tell you he'll be out for, but we can point to what Michael Carrick said, which is that he's refused to guarantee that Ligt will be back between now and the end of the season, which likely tells you it's late April, early May in a best case. And in a worst case, he won't play again this season.
Yeah, so devastating, because he was doing so well before he got injured for Manchester United. So well, and just hope he can get back fit and recovered as soon as possible. But thank you for that. And then lastly, I'll just throw this into the ring, because it is something that I get asked all the time. And it is Cole Palmer, Ben. Cole Palmer, there's been talk for weeks that Cole Palmer would be open to a move to Manchester United. I mean, is there anything in that at all?
Cole Palmer's untouchable at Chelsea. And anybody trying to get Cole Palmer this summer is going to be wasting their time. Even though Esteval wants to play as 10 in the long run, even if Chelsea don't get Champions League football, I don't see any scenario where Chelsea sanction a Cole Palmer exit. And I know we've heard a lot of reports, and I respect those that have said it, around Palmer's unhappy, Palmer's unsettled. Well, he wasn't unhappy and unsettled when he was scoring goals for fun at Chelsea. And I think every player goes through a difficult phase when they're out injured, particularly in Palmer's case with his groin problem, if you think it might be a little bit chronic. But he's fit now. He's focused on Chelsea and trying to get them Champions League football, and then making sure that he makes Thomas Tuchel's World Cup squad. And speaking to Chelsea sources, I would be staggered if Chelsea entertained any offer for Cole Palmer. And if they were to put a value on Cole Palmer, it would obviously be a British transfer record as well. So it doesn't make any sense to me, because Cole Palmer is a 10, right? And if Bruno Fernandes stays, and with Cunha and Mbeumo wanting to play at 10 and Mason Mount still being at the football club, Man United don't need a 10. They need a winger, and they need two deeper lying midfielders in the 8 or 6 position, or two different kinds of sixes, depending on how you clarify it. Cole Palmer ticks no boxes. And if they put their British transfer record on Cole Palmer, it's going to be at the expense of one of the other names that we've mentioned in central midfield, because they're not going to be able to do a Liverpool, even with Champions League football, and put £450 million on the table. So do clubs like Cole Palmer, obviously, because he's one of the best players in the world when he's fit and on form, but have Man United made an approach for him, or do they think he's going to be available this summer? It's a no to both, as far as I'm aware. And as I say, this is not Enzo Fernandez territory, where at the right number, Chelsea might change their mind. There's a few untouchable players at Chelsea Football Club. And by untouchable, I mean 200 million wouldn't do it. 500 million might not even do it, unless somehow there's financial issues that we don't know about. And the two untouchables at Chelsea right now are Moises Caicedo and Cole Palmer. And it would be a massive shock for any amount of money if Chelsea entertained business this summer.
Well, at least we can put a pin in that one. I sort of knew that would be the case, but it is always spoken about, and there's always some rumours about it. So I wanted to get clarification. Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you very much for that. Maybe we'll see him in the England squad. I think a lot of people are hoping that he's going to go to the World Cup with Thomas Tuchel. So let's keep our eye on that. We've got Daniel Thompson saying, live and direct this Thursday was always great. B&B show, things you love to say. Don't worry about the delayed start. We're always here to say, let's talk about it, and say, hi, Beth, Ben, and the United stand. Hope you're all well and having a good day. Great show. Thank you very much, Daniel. Appreciate that. Lil Yo-Yo says, could Man United revisit Danny Welbeck to replace Xerxes if he leaves? If not Welbeck, which striker is a realistic target?
Yeah, as I said before, it won't be Welbeck. Etta is the kind of younger name to have a look at, doing relatively well, particularly in the first half of the season. He's a profile Man United really like, but they need to clarify the future of Xerxes first. I do think there's a realistic chance Xerxes goes, and then Man United would add a striker to their list that they're looking for this summer. And that's what I mean.
Yeah.
As I've said on many, many shows dating back to December, this isn't just about a midfield revamp. This is going to be a massive summer for Man United financially and in terms of volume. The goalkeeper situation, they're expected to stick with Sene Lammens as one, but they're going to have to resolve Diomande, and Andre Onana's not going to come back. Full back and possibly centre back, 2 midfielders, left wing. I don't think they'll add another 10 personally. And then if Xerxes departs, maybe a number 9 as well, because then they'll have the option of Benjamin Sesko with another striker, Chido Obi hopefully coming through, and still a chance to play either Mbeumo or Cunha at 9. So with one more replacing Xerxes if he departs, they'll be well stocked in that position. But it would be a surprise for me if 5 senior players at a minimum don't come through the door for Manchester United this summer. 2 midfielders, at least 1 defender, a left winger, and if Xerxes goes, the number 9.
Exciting. I think that is absolutely needed, especially with Champions League football. Hopefully on the horizon for Manchester United. Champions League nights back at Old Trafford. We're going to need a fully stacked squad. Simmer J Red Devil says, is there any chance United do double deals like they did with Mazraoui and Ligt? For example, Diouf and Fernandes, Diomande and Raum and Tonali / Bruno and Hall. I mean, in dreamland, hopefully, Simmer J. I think every deal... Go on.
Double deals are a bit out of fashion. I think the mirrored deals under PSR was a bit of a fad to circumvent the rules. Double deals, usually it's tough to get value because the club that are selling those 2 players, if they want to hang on to them, realizes independently they can sell them and create bidding wars and get good value for each of them. Double deals only tend to be facilitated if the selling club actually wants to lose a player, and then they bake in the player they want to go with the player you want. So you're actually doing 2 for 1 because the selling club wants one of those 2 players to depart, and you leverage that and say, okay, we'll take one if you give us the other. In the scenarios and the examples you give, the selling club doesn't really want to lose any of the players. So you might diminish your chances going for 2 together instead of just trying to settle for 1. That would certainly be the case with Bruno Guimarães and Lewis Hall. And, you know, it would be the same if they went to Everton, for example, for Njai Branthwaite. Why would Everton entertain both when they're telling you they don't want to lose either?
Yeah, I get that completely. Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you for your super chat. Amit says, Beth, Ben and Bruno Fernandes, my 3 best Bs. Amit, I absolutely love that. That's my favourite super chat.
Show.
Yeah, we need to get Bruno
Fernandes on the show, then I wouldn't say a word. I'll shut up for once and he could take centre stage as the main B.
You've got the connection, Ben. You can get him on the show. I have faith in you. I trust you to get him on. Well, if you can get Bruno Fernandes on for the 3 Bs, that would be my life made. But look, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. What a great show, some great insight, and thank you very much, Ben, once again for joining us. And everyone who's watching, do remember that tonight, join Mark Goldbridge as he watches over the World Cup qualifiers, kicking off at 7:45. It's going to be a tasty one. And then tomorrow, Mark brings you the friendly match, England versus Uruguay. Kick-off is 7:45, taking place at Wembley in London tomorrow night. And make sure you join him over on his That's Football YouTube channel tonight and tomorrow from 7:45. Some big games there. And it's going to be interesting as well tomorrow to see what 11 Thomas Tuchel picks for that very important game, to sort of see where the England squad is at. I'm excited to watch it. Ben, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone in the community for watching. Smash a like on the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you on the next one.